Hi everyone, I'm Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch President, here with our weekly live update on Judicial Watch's activities, fighting and uncovering government corruption. A lot to talk about this week. I know Donald Trump Jr. has been in the news. I'll give you some feedback on that and some updates on what we're doing to independently investigate the Russia issues, which are really an Obama scandal more so than I still think a Trump scandal. Also, some new emails on Abedin and Hillary Clinton, and some interesting information there in terms of, again, potential criminality at the Clinton State Department, as we're seeing evidence from the Clinton server. Also, new details on the cost it takes to move President Trump around, and some even new numbers on President Obama. But first up are the new Clinton emails, the new Abedin emails. So what's been happening is the Judicial Watch, as a result of litigation, has been getting emails on almost a monthly or so basis from the State Department, and these emails are the Abedin emails. So Hillary Clinton had her separate email server, which was illicit, illegal, and all of that, but also there was someone else who had an email account on that server, and it was Abedin, who was very close to her at the Senate, on her campaigns, and at the State Department. And so Mrs. Abedin had all of these, had many emails of government nature on this system, just as Hillary Clinton did. So Abedin had a government account, but she also had this Clinton email account that it looks like had classified information on it, all sorts of other sensitive information, and some embarrassing information related to pay-to-play scandals at the State Department, the intersection of the Clinton Foundation's interest and the State Department, and all sorts of other issues that frankly ought to be subject to serious federal criminal investigation, but hadn't been thanks to the cover-up artists in the Obama administration, Comey FBI, and Loretta Lynn's Justice Department. So we've been getting these emails, we've been releasing them to the American people as a result of litigation, and this is what Judicial Watch does. We just don't come on here and chat about the weather. We are pursuing litigation to get information that you are that you are due as a citizen under the law. We ask for these emails and we demand them in court if they're not turned over to us. So there's a court process that Judicial Watch is pursuing that's resulting in the release of this information I'm going to tell you about. So the latest release, but I think this is the 18th production of records to Judicial Watch, is about 448 pages in total. So obviously we can't tell you each email in there and what's it about. We don't have time for that. I don't even think we could write about each email and what's it about. So I encourage you to go to our website and look at the emails yourself. You should be able to see them up there soon if they're not already up there. So the documents again show that additional instances of Clinton donors and the Clinton Foundation getting favors from the Clinton State Department. And there's also emails showing that even her brother, Hillary Clinton's brother, Tony Rodham, got in on the effort to take care of Clinton donors through his relationship with his sister. Now recall, when Mrs. Clinton became Secretary of State, there were concerns about the Clinton Foundation. Democrats had concerns, President Obama had concerns, and the United States Senate had concerns. And in addition, so to alleviate those concerns caused by the potentials for conflicts of interest with the Clinton Foundation doing all the work it was doing, and then Mr. Clinton's conflicts of interest, Mrs. Clinton promised she would stay out of Clinton Foundation business, and that Mr. Clinton's conflicts of interest would be, if he did speeches, if he did other work on the side that would impact State Department business, he would run it by the State Department for an ethics check. So almost immediately, Mrs. Clinton started violating that agreement, because it was that agreement that allowed the Senate to vote her in and confirm her, and frankly, she wouldn't have been nominated by President Obama unless she kept her promises on these ethics issues. So these new documents show that, first of all, there are new Clinton emails. So she promised, and she testified under oath quite explicitly, at least to the House, and she told us under oath as far as she knew, under penalty of perjury, all of her emails have been turned over. So according to this latest batch, our investigators went through and they found 6 new Clinton email exchanges that were not previously turned over to the State Department by Hillary Clinton. So that brings the total to about 439 additional emails that Judicial Watch found, not Congress, not anyone else, but Judicial Watch found that Hillary Clinton hadn't turned over to the State Department as she promised. And again, these are government emails she had no business taking. You may recall that when she left the State Department, she took all her emails with her and deleted half of them, saying the ones that she deleted were personal. Well, that wasn't the case, because now we have at least 439 emails that she hadn't turned over that were not personal and that were government. How do we know they're government? Because the government turned them over to us, and we wouldn't have gotten to them unless there were government records. So those emails are out there, and there's one interesting email where one of the emails is that Hillary Clinton says, I'm going on memory here, I think she says, I heard it on the radio that there's a cabinet meeting, can I go? Which is kind of funny that she's asking that, and the feedback from, I think it was Abedin, said, well, it was a select group and you weren't necessarily invited, don't take anything personal as a result. But those are the sorts of information about a cabinet meeting and her response, the response of her aide to her attending a cabinet meeting. That was not a government record? Of course it is, and that's why we got it. But she hadn't turned that over as she was required to under the law initially. So there are other documents that show that, again, Doug Band, who was a Clinton Foundation official, was pushing personnel efforts at the State Department. Okay, now remember, Mrs. Clinton said that it had nothing to do with the State Department, the Clinton Foundation and such. But Abedin, who worked at the Clinton Foundation before she came in, and then for a period of time she was actually working at the Clinton Foundation while she was at the State Department, if I recall correctly. Cheryl Mills, who was also a Clinton Foundation crony, were talking with Doug Band about ambassadorships. So the Clinton Foundation was involved in personnel decisions related to ambassadors. And I think at one point Mills says, I was just trying to do this beneath the radar. So again, showing that when it came to ethics, Mrs. Clinton and her team violated the rules that they promised they would follow in order for her to become Secretary of State. There's another issue where Doug Band, again, this Clinton Foundation top executive, I mean, he was the #1 official other than the President and the First Lady, or Mrs. Clinton, and arguably their daughter, Chelsea, at the foundation. And he tells that Abedin that Clinton needs to show some love to Andrew Liveris, who was the CEO of Dow Chemical. Band also asked for Liveris to be introduced to Hillary and have her, quote, mention both me and WJC, William Jefferson Clinton. So they were trying to take care of this big Clinton donor. Dow gave money to the foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative. It was, the numbers were only $1 to $5 million. So this was a small donor, I guess. Also, in the same email, Band pushed for Clinton to do a favor for a foreign national named Karl-Heinz Kogel, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who's a major Clinton Foundation contributor. I looked him up. He's based in Germany, and he wanted Hillary Clinton to give a speech for them. Again, it shows that Band is advocating on behalf of donors, and he's getting Abedin to respond. I'm not sure if the speech was ever made, but the point being that if you were a foundation donor, you had it in with the Clinton State Department. To be clear, if you were a Clinton donor, you had it in with the Clinton State Department. You could get the attention of the top officials at the State Department through the Clinton Foundation. There were ambassador appointments that were talked about as a result of being affiliated with the Clinton Foundation, it looks like. So that's pretty darn serious. Also, her brother, as I said, Tony Rodham, got involved as well in taking care of Clinton donors. He conveyed a letter for Hillary Clinton for a Clinton donor named Richard Park, and Park had donated $100,000 to the Clinton campaign back in '93, and he's in the $100,000 to $250,000 donor range to the Clinton Foundation. And later, he was trying to get Bill Clinton to come to North Korea to speak, working again with Tony Rodham. And the email that comes out that we're showing, that we're pushing out today, shows that Rodham sent a letter to Park on behalf of, Rodham conveyed a letter from Park to Abedin to give to Mrs. Clinton. So again, if you're a Clinton donor and you know the right people, you can get the attention of Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton. And it's so bad that this guy, Richard Park, was somehow tied to the North Koreans. So I think it's a double interest given the current crisis we're facing with the Korean issue. Also, we've got information about another Clinton donor who had regularly appeared in prior emails as seeking favors, emailing Abedin to get help in getting an Iranian woman a visa to come to the United States. So, there may have been a fine humanitarian reason for doing it, but again, this is the sort of donor care and feeding that took place at the State Department. And it looks like they did do that work. And we had previously highlighted how back in May, in a release back in May, that Band attempted to help, Doug Band, the Clinton Foundation guy, attempted to help a concert promoter with the processing of a visa. So you got the attention. You gave money to Clinton, you got the attention. If you gave money to Clinton Inc., as I call it, you got the attention. Also, let's see what else is here. Oh, now Huma Abedin's mother, quite a controversial figure. She's been tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, and she's an Islamist activist. I mean, that's the most charitable way of putting it. So there's this organization known as the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which it's an international organization composed of states that are Islamist. And they're not our friends, in my view. I mean, they want to outlaw criticism of Islam, this Sharia, creeping Sharia attitude they have, and it's the sort of thing that we need to be resisting. So under the Obama administration, they worked hand in glove with them on the Benghazi video, we know, thanks to our prior disclosures. And we even have an envoy to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So Saleh Abedin, Huma's mother, who again, a foreign national, is advising the State Department on who to nominate as the envoy to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. That's going to be controversial. I tell you, that's going to be controversial once that gets out there. National security violations on these emails as well. So there's another email from our ambassador to Kenya. He sent Abedin an email talking about a meeting he had with Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, ironically, who said who was eager to meet the president. And so that email he sent about Gaddafi, the State Department gave us the email. Guess what? They classified parts of it. So this is on Abedin's email system, the official system, but she forwarded that material to her personal account. Another instance of classified material on Hillary Clinton's email server. And there are other instances of very sensitive information being sent to the Clinton Foundation about Mrs. Clinton's travel schedule and where she's going to be and when. And that's just despite, I don't like Mrs. Clinton in terms of her ethics and such, but the risk she played with her life and people's lives by allowing the system to be run the way it was really egregious. Because her schedules were out there, the schedules of other government officials were put out there on this unsecure server, and you don't want the bad guys to know where you are at a specific time. That's why these schedules typically are private and secure. Yet all of this was put out there, and it was all on these email, it was all on this unsecure system, plus it was being sent to the Clinton Foundation, who had no business knowing any of it in large measure. So a lot here, and I've only touched it's only the tip of the iceberg, but I don't know how much more evidence of pay for play, classified information mishandling, and influence peddling documented on this Clinton email server you're going to need in order to finally have a serious criminal investigation of what went on at with the Clinton email issue and the kind of cover-up that the use of the email was designed to promote by keeping it away from the American people. This is what they were covering up, folks. Pay to play, breaking the rules, taking care of donors, having the foundation have a hand in appointing ambassadors, having Abedin's mother, who had no business being anywhere near the State Department, practically speaking, giving her ties to radical Islamists, advising us on who to appoint to a sensitive organization such as the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Really outrageous stuff. So that brings us to now we're all supposed to forget about these scandals and only talk about the Russia scandal, supposedly that is embroiling President Trump. So the news this week is that Donald Trump Jr., there was this email that was exposed. He released it showing that one of his buddies from back in the day when he was working in Russia on the Miss Universe pageant had told him there was someone in Russia who wanted to talk to him with dirt on Hillary Clinton, and that, quote, the Russia government was trying to help Trump. Obviously, that's going to be controversial when an email like that is released, and Donald Trump did go into the meeting, and it looks like the information about the Clinton contacts with the Russians was a pretext for them to come in, this Russian lawyer, and now we're hearing today a former counterintelligence agent for the Soviet Union coming in and meeting with Mr. Trump Jr., Jared Kushner for a period of time, and Paul Manafort, who was chairman of the campaign at the time. Evidently didn't have anything on Clinton, and they were using it as a pretext to get in to talk about a sanctions bill they wanted, or sanctions legislation or efforts they wanted reversed. But it's a very curious situation because this Russian lawyer, who is tied to the Kremlin, is probably a Kremlin cutout, was allowed into the United States in extraordinary circumstances by the Justice Department and the State Department, both, it looks like. So it's curious that they were there. It's also curious that now there are reports out that this Russian dossier has been tied to this company, Fusion GPS, which has also been tied to the Russians. So think about that. The Russian dossier that said there was all sorts of untoward ties, allegedly, between President Trump, then candidate Trump, and the Russians, that supposedly was compiled as part of Russian Republican opposition research into Trump, may have been connected to the Russians themselves. How does that work? I'm beginning to think that the whole Russia was colluding with Trump theory is something that the Russians are planting as part of a disinformation campaign. They're trying to discombobulate the whole system. They were arguably discombobulating the system by supposedly leaking material related to Hillary Clinton and trying to hack into the DNC, assuming that took place, which is a big if. And it looks like they may have been behind, there's enough nuggets of information out there that they may have been behind this infamous Russian dossier. Wouldn't that be incredible if that were true? But I fear we're not going to get the truth if we rely on Robert Mueller. And we rely on the media, which has this anti-Trump agenda that is almost, I can't describe it in terms of its intensity, and where all the rules of journalism seem thrown out in an effort to get Trump. You know, Congress is asking, at least some members are asking the right questions, and there could be some good hearings in this regard. But what Judicial Watch is doing, I just want to reassure you, is that we're asking all the questions too. We now have 6 lawsuits trying to get information about the key information that everyone would want to know about this alleged Russia collusion. Or in our view, the more substantial issue, which is the Russian spying information. And let me tell you about the Russian efforts to get involved with political candidates. It was Judicial Watch who exposed that the State Department under Hillary Clinton had no problem with Bill Clinton going to Russia and having a Russia front company give him $500,000 to make a speech while she was Secretary of State. Think about that. Now remember, Bill Clinton is married to Hillary Clinton. So if you give $500,000 to Bill Clinton personally, you're giving $500,000 to Hillary Clinton. So Hillary Clinton, through her husband, made $500,000 from Russia while she was Secretary of State. Is that under investigation? Supposedly it was at one point. There were some intrepid FBI agents and maybe a few brave U.S. attorneys or assistant U.S. attorneys who were looking into it last year and the year before. Where are those investigations? And then, of course, we've got the issue with John Podesta, Mrs. Clinton's campaign chairman, actually in the past being in business with the Russian government, serving on the board as Russian government agents, getting money, his company, from the Russian government. Is there an investigation into him? It's just very interesting that the only Russian connections we're allowed to ask questions about in this town are the really weak connections between President Trump, his team in Russia, but the more substantial connections in terms of $500,000 going into Mrs. Clinton's personal coffers and millions of dollars being laundered, arguably illegally, into the Clinton Foundation. Where's the investigation there? You know, by the way, I did some research yesterday. When you're an agent of a foreign government doing work on their behalf, you're supposed to file a Foreign Agents Registration Act document announcing to the world what you're doing. Well, go ahead, and you can do this, and you can verify this. Go on to Google and search the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and you'll see there are ways of figuring out how many FARA reports are there connected to agents of Russia. And I counted 246 or 76, well over 200 FARA reports connected to Russia here in the United States. So is all of that collusion? Does all of that need to be investigated? I don't know. Now let's talk about Chinese Foreign Agent Registration Act documents. I didn't look that up. My guess is the number's even a multiple of that. And then go ahead and check the Saudis. So Donald Trump got this email, Donald Trump Jr., saying the Russian government likes Trump and they have some information on Hillary Clinton. If I were him, I would have deferred on the meeting. I would have said, what is it you have? If you've got specific information, let us know. But I don't need to meet with government agents directly. But he did it, and it's not the end of the world that he did. In retrospect, he probably wouldn't have done it, given now what he knows, certainly given the media focus on it. But let's not exaggerate the nature of what went on here. The Russians were trying to game everybody. And in terms of actual substantial resources, they were giving money to Hillary Clinton. So the one thing I also had a question about was, supposedly they had information about improper Russia support for the DNC. Now, according to Donald Trump Jr., the lawyer came in and started talking about it, but she didn't seem to be making much sense about it, which to me didn't answer the question. Well, was there improper Russia support for the DNC? Was there a nugget of truth there that wasn't conveyed properly, or it was dangled but then withdrew? I'd like to know if the FBI is investigating that too. So this Russia scandal has obviously grown more significant for President Trump as a result of his son meeting with this Russian agent. But this Russian agent's this Russian lawyer's got ties to Democrats. She is tied to this Fusion GPS group, it looks like. So it's a rather confusing, muddled mess that doesn't necessarily make Trump look worse, but it suggests that this issue is much more complicated than the left would have you believe. And again, it doesn't reflect on the necessity of investigating the connections that are substantial and documented, where you have monies flowing from Russia and its entities to Bill Clinton's foundation and Hillary Clinton's personal coffers through her husband's speechmaking. So we're tracking that. And so we've got 6 lawsuits about issues related to this. We want the Comey memos. We want to know about this Fusion GPS, this dossier. We asked and sued for records about it. We want to know about the unmasking. We want to know what exactly the government purports to have on the information with General Flynn. And there's something else we want to know about, too, that I can't recall. But I've got, I think, 4 or 5 of the 6. And Judicial Watch has got all these separate lawsuits. And I've advised the White House and it's public, I've been public about this, extreme transparency. Extreme transparency on Benghazi, on the IRS, and on the Russia stuff. And what's going on now is the deep state is withholding material that could make Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama look bad, or slow rolling it, or stonewalling our document request for it. But they're also withholding material that I am pretty sure would be very helpful to President Trump's issues with Russia. Where's the transcript of the phone call that General Flynn had with the Russian ambassador? What was said? Why is that being withheld? I can't think of a national security reason for holding it. I can think of a reason to hold it because it makes it look like something bad happened. That's the sort of information that needs to be released, and I've encouraged the White House to be direct in making sure transparency is king here on the Clinton-Obama scandals and on this so-called Trump scandal, which I really think at its heart is an Obama scandal, given the illegal spying and other things that went on targeting the Trump team and the unmasking that went on. Or at least I suspect it's illegal spying. I know the unmasking was illegal, and I know the leaking was illegal classified information. We're also tracking what it costs to move the presidency around. And we were famous for doing this during the Obama administration, and we continued doing it during the Trump administration. The media, the big liberal media, didn't much care about President Obama's abusive travel. Now, of course, that the President Trump, although he stopped doing that, I think in part due to our highlighting the cost of his doing it, he hasn't gone down to Mar-a-Lago as much as he used to. But we're tracking the numbers. We did it during the Obama administration. We're going to do it during the Trump administration. And so the numbers now show, according to the numbers we're releasing, I think today, I may be giving you a preview. We may not even release them until Monday. The new records show new expenses totaling $2.3 million in President Trump's travel. And the numbers mostly reflect the cost of his Melania Trump's travel back and forth to Mar-a-Lago. So when she travels, it costs on the military jet she uses, which frankly I don't think she needs to use, $10,000 per hour. So if you're going from New York, where she was traveling from often, to West Palm Beach, it's about 3 hours each way, so it's 6 hours times 10. It brings it over to $60,000. When President Trump went down to Mar-a-Lago to host the Japanese Prime Minister, that cost $600,000. Now, he was conducting government business down there, so it may be more difficult to complain about that. This is something that you may not like, though. Vice President Pence flew Air Force Two 5.5 hours to Houston for the Super Bowl. And that cost $90,000. Now, I'm not saying they don't travel, but I'm just saying there's got to be a cheaper way of doing this. We've also released documents showing that Obama's travel now exceeds $100 million. And we didn't look at every presidential trip President Obama made, but we looked at the trips that seemed unnecessary or inconsequential. It includes new numbers to Mrs. Obama's trip to China in 2014, and that was $389,000 for taxpayers for someone without a government position to fly to China. So now President Obama is the $100 million man when it comes to presidential travel. Now, of course, as I said in my statement, this is a good statement. And so I'll read it directly to you. The liberal media didn't care much about Judicial Watch's reporting on President Obama's abusive travel, but now are keenly interested in President Trump's trips. And either way, President Trump should do what President Obama refused to do: take a look at the cost of travel and figure out ways to reform it. So I don't think he needs Air Force One to travel to Mar-a-Lago all the time. I mean, they don't need it. I'm sure the military would support the president in ways that we can't contemplate, both because they want to protect him and secure him as commander-in-chief, but also because it's a big government bureaucracy and they just think big and they don't really think about the costs that we might want to think about. And certainly this president, who owns a plane, knows what it costs to run planes and probably would be aghast at some of the costs it takes just to move him 2 or 3 hours down the coast so he could spend some time on the weekend at his home, which I don't necessarily begrudge him. I only ask that they reform the system in a way so the taxpayers aren't being gouged through this government operation of moving the president around. The presidency is a massive operation. In my view, it costs too much. It needs to be reformed and curtailed. And by the way, these numbers don't include the Secret Service costs, because when the Secret Service travels, they incur costs as well. We obviously want the president to be protected, but this is an additional cost to moving the president around, is bringing Secret Service with him. So there's got to be cheaper ways to do it. President Obama didn't give a rat's tail about fixing it. You know, he was the rock star. He's going to travel wherever. If he was going to go to Hawaii, he was going to go, and it didn't matter what it cost. He was going to go golfing across the country. He was going to go no matter what it cost. You know, one of the other scandals that have been consistent from president to president to president, oftentimes presidents will take Air Force One to go campaigning and do political fundraisers. Now, if it's used for a campaign, Air Force, the taxpayer is supposed to be reimbursed in part by the campaign. But I think it's either the cost of a commercial first-class ticket. Yeah, it's the cost of a first-class ticket. Now, you know that doesn't cover the cost of Air Force One. Now, I'm not saying they have to cover the cost of Air Force One, but certainly if these government vehicles are used really mostly for presidential political travel, the party should pay more. I don't know how much more, but they should pay more than a commercial first-class ticket to use Air Force One. So those are the types of reforms we can think about. We should ask whether they should need to use Air Force One. When Judicial Watch first started in looking at the cost of presidential travel, what initially got our interest was the beginning of the Obama administration. President Obama said he had promised his wife a date night once he won. Great. But that date night happened to be in New York. And I'm thinking, boy, that's an expensive date night. So we asked for the cost, and it turned out to be about $29,000. But the president didn't take Air Force One to get up to New York. He took a smaller jet. So you may not know this, but the Air Force has an entire wing over at Andrews Air Force Base of military jets and planes that are all luxury class. So they've got your equivalent, the military equivalent of a Lear jet, larger airliner-style planes. Air Force One obviously is in a class by itself, but they have smaller planes that are all business class for other VIP travel. So there's an entire wing of the Air Force designated to moving VIPs in government and Congress around the country. So President Obama took that cheaper plane up to New York, and I wonder whether these cheaper planes could be used to move President Trump around. I can't imagine he would object to that. So these are the sorts of things that Judicial Watch is doing. We hold President Obama accountable, we hold President Trump accountable, and the numbers are what they are. And it's our job to report them to you, suggest areas for reform, and do with them what you will. And I hope the President pays attention to our well-considered critiques of the cost of presidential travel, and he reforms that not only for this president, but for presidencies in the future. So there's a lot going on. New Clinton emails, new Abedin emails. We're on it in terms of the Russia investigation. You can rely on us to get to the truth. We're getting the documents. We're going to push to get the documents through our litigations and litigation and FOIA lawsuits, and this new travel information that you can rely on Judicial Watch to get to you, because when it comes to travel numbers, the media has been all wrong on a lot of the numbers, and you have to rely on us to know exactly what we're talking about. So thanks again for joining us today. We'll see you next week, and thanks to you who are supporting Judicial Watch, because it's because of you that we're able to litigate and educate on behalf of the American people and hold this massive government here in Washington to account. And if you're not supporting us, you ought to consider supporting us. Go to our website at judicialwatch.org. We're on Facebook and Twitter as well. Thanks again, and have a great weekend.